and welcome to another edition of Trader.tv. Today we got Gavin from StikeAd's in the office. Gavin, thanks for coming in.
Hi there, thank you for having me.
And today we're going to talk about the management and execution of data both in desktop and in mobile. And Gavin's going to do an illustration of how the infrastructure differs for that. But before we do that, Gav, just give us an outline of what you do at Strike and what StikeAd are doing these days.
So I'm the COO at StikeAd. We're a mobile DSP. We've got presence globally, so we're in the US, we're in Europe, we're in Singapore. We predominantly work with the trading desks at the big agency groups, and we do some managed work as well with some of the agencies. But we're very much starting to see more and more shift in terms of the desks executing more and more in a self-serve fashion in mobile, which I think is a very positive thing for the industry. So that's us.
Thank
in
you.
a nutshell.
Okay, over the last 12 to 24 months, the DMP has become a very important piece of technology in this space. And there is a perception that DMPs are actually a catch-all tool for managing and execution of data across different channels, but the reality is a lot different than that in terms of mobile and desktop. So do you I mean, obviously you're a mobile specialist, and you use different tools for the mobile versus desktop. Will you give us an idea why there is a disparity between the technology in terms of DMP use mobile versus desktop?
So I think if you take a look at the world today, you have got the real world, excuse my writing, and you've got the digital world. And digital predominantly over the last 15 years has been sitting in the digital world. So whether that's people sitting on their laptops or PCs, and all of this is being tracked by cookies.
So the cookies are the basis for tracking all this information.
And whether that's display advertising, whether it's search links, whether it's social, whether it's video, all of this activity is tracked by cookies. And the behaviour that comes out of the data and the behaviour that comes out of PC, so the websites that we're viewing, the purchases that we're making, all these signs of interest and intent, they're all being tracked through cookies and coming down and powering DMPs. And it's all centred around the cookie. Mobile obviously is very different. As we know very well, we have got some challenges in terms of the complexities of mobile. We have got app inventory coming out of mobile phones. We have mobile web inventory. App inventory is obviously the prevalent source of usage and data and display inventory in mobile. So you're probably looking at about 80% coming out of app and about 20% on web. Tablet is slightly different. Tablet is more like 50-50. But as we know, the numbers of smartphones is much bigger than the numbers of tablets out there, which makes the app opportunity from mobile phones the significant mobile opportunity. And the key difference here is that everything is based around a device identifier. And the device identifier is what so much of the performance attribution, the behavioural signal that we're capturing, it's all being tied back to a device identifier, which makes it not quite incompatible, but incredibly complex to make this connection between a cookie and a device identifier. There's a few exceptions there, obviously, in terms of very large publishers who have login data on the desktop and mobile devices. Obvious
Facebook and Google
Facebook being the biggest examples. But by and large, everyone else is playing in a world where this is separate, and that's why over the last 5 or 10 years we've seen a rise in mobile ad nets, and they've been very separate from desktop display companies.
Specifically because the data points they're using are not cookie based, but more sort of mobile based.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the points that you kind of raised there is the data points that are typically tracked in desktop will be based on a pixel that's placed somewhere, whether that's a site that just generally captures an interest like sport, or whether that's a pixel in a conversion process that signals that somebody's about to buy. Mobile is obviously, as it says, it's a mobile device, it's with us, so there is a lot of location signal that comes out here, and that is a very different bit of data than has ever been available in this area.
And this is the type of data that you as a company use specifically in your sort of campaigns that you work with your clients?
So there's a lot of different ways of using location data. You've kind of got, I guess, the more simple use of location. So we could have McDonald's to come to us and they would simply want to target people who are near to their stores. So we're taking real-time location data in and we're just retargeting back based on known locations. So that's the most simplistic use of location, and that's been around for a while. Where things start to get more interesting is the idea that we have mobile devices with us all the time. DMPs, mobile DMPs are able to do deals with exchanges, and they're able to ingest the streams of data coming in and actually build up a picture of people and their lives. So you can see that somebody's going to a DIY store or a car showroom a couple of times over the last month, and you can, based on that real world behaviour, you can put them into a bucket of auto buyers. And that bucket of people is an incredibly powerful targeting metric for an automotive company for something like a month after you pick up that repetitive behaviour. And it's a more telling behaviour than I think. What you tend to find in the digital world is sometimes we behave in an aspirational way. So I might go onto a Ferrari website in the digital world. I can't afford to buy a Ferrari today. I'd love to, but I can't. But I can behave aspirationally there because there's no pressures on me. But making the commitment of going to a car store, whether it is a Ferrari store or a Volkswagen store, you kind of get a much more strong signal there that this person is actually close to buying a car and therefore maybe more interested in receiving advertising relevant to.
So when you work with trading desks, do you find that even with mobile devices, they're basing a lot of their sort of data execution layer on cookie-based DMPs, and how do you sort of educate them around the differences between the two things?
So I think this kind of speaks to one of the challenges that exists around the growth in the mobile DMP space. A lot of the time when we see briefs coming through, and whether they come through from a planning and buying team in an agency or whether they come from a trading desk, there's already been quite a high degree of work that's already gone into what's the likely, what does this campaign look like? And because there's a very big awareness of the big desktop DMPs, there's probably already tactics that are implied in the plan. There isn't necessarily awareness at that early planning stage of what can be done with mobile data. So people don't create briefs where they're talking about capturing real-world behaviour and people who are, going to DIY stores every month, or going to cinemas, or business travellers who are going to airports every Monday and Friday. And so what we tend to find is that we're having to proactively pitch mobile DMP opportunities into the desk or into an agency. And obviously proactively pitching something is great for kind of creating awareness, but it has a lower success rate than it does meeting the brief. And so we're working very hard with a lot of our partners in terms of creating that awareness, but we're also working hard at the top of the funnel with some of our partners in terms of creating awareness at CMO level and higher up in the agencies, because there's no doubt that everyone's excited by this data when they hear about it, but the awareness isn't necessarily as high as it should be.
It just feels to me that there seems to be fragmentation in the space, and obviously we've seen Facebook launch Atlas this week with a cookieless targeting solution, apparently based on their login IDs and the mobile data they have. Do you see? I mean, will there be a consolidation of this? I mean, the idea of like bringing all desktop cookie-based data and obviously this mobile data together and merging them and actually making it all that sort of do execution available across multi-channel as opposed to like this siloed approach. Do you see that happening at some stage?
I think it has to happen. I think from an efficiency perspective, I mean, it's not just that it needs to happen on the DMP side, it needs to happen on the exchange side, it needs to happen on the DSP side, because having siloed approaches to every different tactic is obviously less efficient for the desks and for agencies. So I think what we need to happen is that the space needs to mature more. There needs to be smarter solutions that enable this cross-device connection, as we've already mentioned, and as you just said. There are a few companies out there that have privileged access to data and a one-to-one relationship with consumers that allow them to make that connection. Most players in the space, when you talk about kind of percentage-wise by the number of companies, most companies don't have that. So a lot of the companies who don't have that data, there's a lot of talk right now around kind of not fingerprinting but probabilistic techniques for creating cross-device connections.
A neutral standard as opposed to a sort of a solution offered by two of the big media companies in the space.
Exactly. So I think we're starting to see it happen on the media side. Obviously, a lot of the big publishers will package up their desktop, their mobile, their video, and they'll put that all into one, and that it goes down very well with agencies. That's happening on the media side. It's not yet happening on the data side, but there are signs of it happening. If you look, for example, at the recent acquisition by Lotame of Admobius, and you can see an online DMP who's very aware of the fact that the quantity of data coming in from here versus here is becoming proportionally less interesting. It's still a very big pool of data,
of course.
So there's a huge commercial opportunity on an ongoing basis here. But this is not something that you want to miss. And so Lotame have done that. We still see a number of other mobile-specific players, companies like Factual, like AdSquare, like Static. These companies are all very focused on the mobile space and the mobile opportunity because it is complex. I think even the mobile DMPs would acknowledge the fact that the amount of ad impressions or bid requests that are coming out of exchanges, sometimes the inconsistency of the data that comes from each of the different exchanges, it is a very big job to try and sort through that and actually pull out meaningful propositions for advertisers. So to create an auto bucket sounds easy, but actually it's very difficult to do. You have to go out, you have to understand places in the real world, so you effectively need like a latitude, longitude phone book where you can understand the location of every Nissan dealer, and then you have to decide, well, what's an acceptable radius? If I've got a Nissan dealership here, is this 10 meters or is it 100 meters? Or so you have to, and then what's the frequency and recency? There's a lot of things that you have to sift through to actually create interesting buckets that advertisers are going to respond to well.
So it's likely that the mobile DMP will be around for some time yet before we can do that.
I think it will. I think for a couple of reasons. I think, as I said, because it's still relatively new and because there's a lot of stuff still being figured out in terms of how do we translate this data into something meaningful, the old big data kind of debate, plus also the added complexity of creating a reliable and open cross-device solution, which we know there's a couple of companies working in that space, but we also know that none of these are really operating at scale in terms of adoption by the desks or by the agencies.
Well, Gav, thanks for running us through that whole differentiation in mobile DMP and desktop DMP. So we look forward to seeing the next episode with you. And that was Trader Talk TV, and we'll see you next week.